button. Okay, so we're actually not going to talk about the parsha. We're going to talk about the haftarah. And it's known that the 3 weeks, which started on Sunday, or really started on this past Shabbat, but started on Sunday, practically. So we read the haftarahs that we read for these 3 weeks are the haftarahs that talk about the prophecy of Yirmiyah and his unfortunate prediction of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and all of the calamities that would come to play. After Tisha B'Av, after the 3 weeks, we have 7 haftarahs that we read called the Shiva Denechamta, which are the 7 haftarahs of comfort to help us, overcome the feeling of sadness that we had during the 3 weeks, and especially the 9 days in Tisha B'Av. And here's where we have the Orach Chaim, the tradition of this haftarah thing. So this first haftarah that we read is on this Shabbos, and it's the beginning of the haftarah of Yirmiyah, and that's what we want to read right now as a introduction to our discussion. So this is the beginning of the prophecy, or the beginning of the book of Yirmiyah, and it starts off by saying how Hashem is trying to convince Yirmiyah to be a navi, to be a prophet. So let's take a look at verse number 3. It was in the days of the king Yehoiakim, who was, the kingdom of Judah at this point, the kingdom of Yehuda. At this point, the 10 tribes, the kingdom of Israel, was already kidnapped and taken by the Assyrians. So now it was just the kingdom of Judah, and it was until the end of the 11 years of Tzidkiah, who was the king, and Tzidkiah was taken to. Yehoiakim was taken to Babel, and Tzidkiah took over in his place. And Yirmiyah starts to recount his prophecy by saying, Hashem came to me saying, before you, I'm going to rephrase this, I'm going to paraphrase these next words, but take a look in text number 5, where Hashem tells Yirmiyah, or the way Yirmiyah is quoting it, Hashem says, before I formed you in the womb, in other words, before your physical body existed, I knew you. And when you had not yet emerged from the womb, I had appointed you a prophet of the nation I made you. And what does Yirmiyah answer? Hashem, I'm just a kid. I'm young. I'm too young for this job. So let's examine this for a second, because this is going to be the basis of our discussion tonight. So number 1, when Hashem tells Yirmiyah that from before you became a fetus, before you were in the womb, I already knew or designated you or consecrated you as a prophet, as a holy person, is a little bit interesting, because the soul, the neshama, every single neshama that's in this world, including ours, comes directly from Hashem, is a part of Hashem. So what was unique and special about Yirmiyah's neshama before it came into Yirmiyah's body? And also, what happened to free choice? So let's take a closer look. Verse number 7 is Hashem reassuring him, but let us go to the discussion about Yirmiyah and the womb. Okay, so there is a discussion in the Talmud about when the soul enters the body, because if the soul is already designated for a specific body, but even before the body is conceived, so in that case, you could say that Hashem already designated Yirmiyah's soul to be a prophet. But that's only once the fetus exists, because the fetus is where the soul is where the soul is designated to go. In fact, there's another piece of the Talmud where it says that every single drop of semen that's going to create a human being, the angel brings it before Hashem and asks Hashem, what type of fetus or which family should this seed go into? So that happens once there is a fetus, once there is an existence of a physical form. So here's the discussion about when the soul actually enters the body. So Rav Smilai taught that a fetus in its mother's womb is comparable to a folded notebook. It rests with its hands on its 2 sides of its head, its arms on its 2 knees, and its heels on its on its bottom, basically like crouched in form, and its head rests between its knees. Its mouth is closed, and it's the cord is open, and it eats from whatever its mother eats, and it drinks from whatever its mother drinks. There are no days more blissful for a person than these days where the fetus is in the mother's womb. As it says, if only I were in the months of old, as in the days when Hashem watched over me. This is Eov describing what it's like to be basically as a metaphor of what it's like to be in the mother's womb, which are the days that have months but do not have years. That's obviously talking about, when a fetus is taught the entire Torah. So what was that last line here? Let's back up. So the Gemara basically says, let me just back up for a second. The Gemara basically says that while a fetus is in its mother's womb, an angel teaches the baby the entire Torah. Where does that come from? Even though the Talmud's quoting it, but where's the origin of that? So let us take a look at this next piece. This is from a different piece of the Talmud from Sanhedrin. And here's another discussion. When does an infant enter the world to come? That's an interesting way of phrasing it. But in other words, when does an infant, get a soul? So Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon Bar Rebbe disagree. One says when they are born, that life begins at birth. And the other says from when they speak. In other words, even when they're born, they don't yet have a soul up until the point that they can actually, say words. So Ravina said from the moment of conception is actually when the soul it enters the fetus. So Nachum Bar Yitzchak said from circumcision. And by the way, for a female, circumcision is a girl. When a girl is born, it's considered as if that's when her circumcision takes place. In other words, it's the same period of time. So Etana taught from the name of Meir, from the moment the infant says Amen for the first time. So we have like 5 different opinions of when the soul enters the body, which is a little bit confusing, because this is not a subject matter where it's a halachic implication or it's a matter of opinion. We're arguing over a fact over here. When does the godly soul enter the body is a question of fact. When does it happen? When does it begin? When does life begin? And we have 5 different opinions, one namely at conception, one at birth, one at circumcision, and one when a child speaks, and the other when a child answers Amen for the first time. Those are very distinct and different periods of time in a person's life. So how is it possible that that we could debate when the neshama actually enters the body? It's a factual discussion, and it's a very difficult one to just accept that it's a debate in the Talmud. So here comes an interesting explanation, and that is that there's a different stage of the neshama entering the body. There's different levels, there's different possibilities. And each step and each stage represents a different part of life. So let's skip this next Mishnah, because this is one that we know very well, so we say before the Pirkei Avos, but let's go straight to this text number 6, where we talk about the stages. So the Rebbe explains it like this. The Rebbe is explaining the stages that the Talmud tells us about, when does the soul enter the body. So the Rebbe starts like this. When the fetus, this is text number 6 on the screen. When the fetus is in its mother's womb, it has a godly soul. But that soul is not integrated with its body. So this is very important. So the whole debate about does life begin at conception or does life begin at birth is not what we're discussing here. Because even according to the opinions that the soul is given to the fetus at conception, it's not a complete integration yet. It's more of a, in technology, we have different types, there's different levels of integration between apps. You could have a fully integrated system that totally talks to each other, or you could have one that you have to manually, through different coding or different tools, connect one piece of, one database of technology to another. It could be, it's a process. So here, even though the fetus already has a soul somewhat designated for it, but it's not integrated with the body yet. So it's not a complete light. It's not a complete person, which is why the baby can't be born yet right away when it's a conception. So that's stage number 1. So even the purely physical life force is not fully revealed and active. Hence, it is sustained by the food of its mother. It doesn't have an independent being yet. So true entrance of the soul into the body is when the body and soul become unified and integrated, such as one can see the soul affecting the body. So this is very important. So basically, we have, and once again, we started this discussion about Yirmiyah and about Hashem telling Yirmiyah that he designated him a prophet even before his conception. So we're going to get back to that, explain that puzzling verse. But over here, we're learning about different levels and stages of connection between the soul and the body. So stage number one is when, as far as we know, is when conception happens. The soul becomes connected to the body, but it's not integrated. It's more of a interface, but it's not really completely integrated one to the other. What defines the soul entering the body? Birth. Why? Because at birth, or at least we're going to see what that means at birth. But the first clue that we have is that when you could notice or the impact the soul is having on the body. Once you could see that independency, that the body is a living being, a living force, because of the soul, then we know the soul entered the body. So that's stage number two. But even though the child is born, even though the child is already born, and now we say the soul has for sure entered the body because the baby boy or baby girl is a living independent being, but the effect of the godly soul is not immediately apparent. Rather, it is their animating soul, which is synonymous with their physical life force that drives their existence. So we don't necessarily see the godliness of the soul within a baby yet. Only once a baby boy is circumcised does the soul become truly connected and one with the body. And the same goes for a girl. When a girl is born, she's considered to be naturally circumcised in a sense that her soul is coming from a higher place, and therefore her body is naturally refined in a level of circumcision. So when that happens, that connection happens, and there's a mitzvah attached to it, then you could already see the fact that the soul is impacting the body. I paraphrase that, so let me read it in the text. Only once the boy is circumcised does the soul become truly connected and one with the body. Bris Milah, Hashem's commandment to circumcise, physically modifies the body, and as such furthers the connection of body and soul to another level where now it's integrated. And here we have that quote that a girl is considered to have been circumcised from birth. So that level of connection is apparent only once there's a mitzvah that takes place. And then you could say that the soul is really now one and united with the body. But those are only still covering a few of the opinions. We have the conception opinion, we have the birth opinion, and we have the circumcision opinion. But there were two more. One is when the child speaks, is when the soul enters the body, and one is when the child answers amen. So let's take a look at that. So these are, just to recap, the ones that we talked about is the conception begins when the fetus is in the womb, or at conception. I'm sorry, the life begins, or the soul enters the body when the fetus is in the womb. Number two is at birth, and number three is the circumcision. Okay. But there's another aspect here of the child growing up and not yet required to fulfill the mitzvahs. And we're going to see this in this next text. Because when a child, up until a child is 3 years old, a child is not required to do any mitzvahs. In fact, if you've been to, let's say a Chabad family's home with a child is younger than 3, if a light switch or something needs to be turned off, you sometimes try to pick up the baby and see if the baby will do it, because the baby is not required to fulfill any of the mitzvahs. Because a baby under 3 is not yet connected to that level of mitzvahs in a way that they have to be careful with them. Now, it's actually bar and bat mitzvah when a boy or girl becomes required and obligated to fulfill the Torah mitzvahs. But already already after 3, we try to already educate the children to start practicing the Torah mitzvahs, even though they're not fully required yet. But we try to train them in that way. But younger than 3, we don't even try. And there's a halachic implication to this, and that's what we have over here in text number 7. So we all know that in the morning when we wake up, we have to wash our hands from the Netilat Yadayim. We wash our hands not for bread, but just one, on each hand 3 times. And here's the reasoning for that. The Alter Rebbe writes like this. Our sages cautioned in the Talmud about the spirit of impurity resting on a person's hands upon awakening, saying that it is not removed entirely until they're washing 3 times alternately. So basically, when we fall asleep, because part of our soul leaves our body, so a negative force, a negative energy takes over our body. And when we wake up, it leaves, but it sort of leaves its remnants in our hands. And that's why we have to wash our hands to make sure that we get rid of that negative energy. They also, and therefore, before we wash our hands, they warn that before washing, we should not touch our eyes, ears, nose, mouth. When one sleeps and the holy soul departs, the spirit of impurity takes hold of the body. And when the soul returns to the body, the spirit of impurity departs from the entire body and remains only on the hands. By the way, just as a little interesting fact, this is one of the reasons why we do shmira after somebody passes away. We have someone that's always with the person who passed with the deceased all the way until burial, because we want to protect the body from being taken over by any negative energy. And when we're there saying Tehillim and doing what we need to do, it helps ensure that the body is constantly in good hands. So for this reason, it has become customary to be lenient with regards to washing the hands of younger children who have not reached an educatable age. With regard to Torah and its mitzvahs. And this is because the soul enters into the body in a real way when the boy reaches 13 years old and 1 day, and when a girl when she reaches 12. So basically, a child doesn't yet have the requirement or the obligation to fulfill the Torah or mitzvah. So therefore, their negative energy is not really negative. So therefore, the washing the hands in the morning is more of, you do it because you want to train. You don't have to do it because you don't have that negative energy yet, because you don't have the obligation. I'm going to stop here. There's more text to this. I'll leave it on the screen for a few seconds. But practically what this means is that the soul is not fully integrated with the person up until bar bat mitzvah. So even though the soul enters the body at birth, and the soul is integrated with the body with the first mitzvah of circumcision, and even more so when the boy or girl answers amen or speaks. But till bar bat mitzvah, the soul is not fully 100% integrated with the person. So here we see multiple stages of the soul's connection with the body. Why are we doing this? Why are we talking about this? Why does it matter? We have our soul. Does it make a difference if our soul is 70%, enclosed within us, or 90%? Why is this important? So there's something very interesting that we're going to take a look at that will give us all insight into the discussion Hashem had with Yirmiyah, as well as how we should see the power and uniqueness of the soul that we were given. Okay. So so this is where we have that discussion, or we have the source of that discussion about while the child is in the womb, while the infant and the fetus is in the womb, it says that an angel teaches the fetus the entire Torah. And once the child enters the world, an angel hits the child on the mouth and causes him or her to forget the entire Torah they've learned. We actually talked about this one time in one of our Torah study classes, but it's still a great concept to repeat. Basically, through the months of pregnancy, when a fetus is forming in the womb, so that an angel teaches the fetus the entire Torah, literally the entire Torah. And we're actually taught that the little dent that we have on our lip is caused by that angel that sort of taps us to forget the Torah and mitzvahs, the Torah that we learned in the womb. So there's a bunch of questions that come up for this. First of all, what's the point? Why teach the fetus the entire Torah? And if you're going to teach the fetus the entire Torah, why make the baby, when the baby is born, forget the entire Torah? That's so mean. Like, if you're going to teach the baby the whole Torah, prepare them for the world and empower them to take on their position in the world, why mess it up? I mean, ask any teacher about what's the most frustrating aspect of teaching is that when you teach a child something and they don't listen or they forget or whatever, I mean, you have to repeat yourself over and over again. So what's the point of this? Why does the angel make the child forget? So there's two concepts here. One is, as we know, life is about challenge and overcoming challenges. And therefore, while the fetus is in the womb, when we say that it's the best days or the best months of a person's existence, because they're completely, under the care of its mother, and apparently has this angel teaching it Torah, there's nothing better. And life is not about that. Life is about challenges, physical and spiritual. We have to overcome challenges. We're not meant to have it easy. This is similar to when the Israelites were in the desert, and they had everything they needed. They had the clouds protecting them. They had all the different, all their needs taken care of. They had the manna falling from the sky. Everything was perfect. Yet when they would go into the land of Israel, they would have to work for everything. They would have to plow. They'd have to plant. They would have to go through the reality of life and understand and relationships with other people and everything that goes along with being an independent nation and the challenges that goes along with it. That's really what life was about, which is why the desert was only a preparation to give them the strength and the encouragement they needed to go into the land of Israel. So too, the fetus is given this glory time of being taken care of and having everything it's being taken care of. And then afterwards, once it's born, then the baby's on its own. The baby has to grow up as a full human being and actually, go through the challenges of life in a way that they're able to overcome them and rise to a higher level physically and spiritually. So that's the basic answer, but there's also another answer. And there's actually a song that the Rebbe taught us on one year Simchas Torah in the early 60s. And it's a very famous Chabad tune known as the Shamil Nigun. And the story is told about a Chechen rebel. This was in the 1700s, let's say. There was a Chechen rebel who was very powerful and had a very strong army. And the Russian Tsar was unable to conquer these mountains in Chechnya because this Shamil guy was so strong and so powerful and so elusive and shrewd, and they were unable to capture him. Until finally, there was one general in the Russian army that had an idea, is that they're going to fake a peace treaty, say, listen, we give up. We're not trying to capture you anymore. Let's make peace. Let's work together. Let's engage in commerce. But it was a fake peace treaty because when Shamil came down from his hiding place in the mountains, instead of making peace, they captured him and they put him in chains. But every year they would bring him to the mountains that they used to rule over, and they used to just taunt him by showing him, these beautiful mountains. And the Rebbe said this is a metaphor of the soul. That the neshama is in the perfect place before it comes into the world. It's it's part of Hashem. It has everything. Everything is perfect. But when the neshama has to be, limited and entered and sort of conform into a human body, it's basically imprisoned for the neshama. The neshama is limited and taken away from its glory days, and it now has to work in exile or in the reality of all the challenges it has to face. And every so often, whenever we go to shul or do a mitzvah, or whenever we reconnect our neshama with Hashem, we're able to sort of show the neshama the glory that it used to have and teach the neshama that it's actually going to rise to even a greater occasion. So there's something very special about the neshama's descent downwards in a painful way into this human body, to the fact that it can actually grow to much greater heights through refining and elevating the body that it's in. But now let's go back to Yirmiyah, because Yirmiyah, the word Yirmiyah is actually significant, because the Medrash tells us, why was he called Yirmiyah? Look at text number 9a. It's because during his time, Yerushalayim was a place of destruction, which is the word Yirmiyah. It's a bit of an Aramaic word, but it means the same thing, which is that it represents destruction of Jerusalem. Now, there was another prophet known as Isaiah, which we all know his quotes. One nation shall not lift a sword to another nation. Wolf shall lie with the lamb. There's lots of glory, and dream, magical words in the book of Yeshaya. But don't forget, Yeshaya was living in the times of Chizkiah. Yeshaya was living in the times of when the kingdom of Yehuda was very strong, and it was during the time when the Jewish people were living in the land of Israel, and everything was not everything, but for the most part, it was a spiritual Mecca. And yet, Yirmiyah, if you look in the book of Yirmiyah, it's very depressing. Not to mention, besides the book of Yirmiyah, there's the Megillah of Eicha we read on Tisha B'Av that was written by Yirmiyah, also very depressing. Why? Because the Yirmiyah lived at a very depressing time. He lived in the time of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what Hashem told Yirmiyah, what we read in text 1, is where it's puzzling. Because Hashem told Yirmiyah, already I designated you to be a prophet during this time of destruction before you were even conceived. Not before you were born. Before you were conceived. Now, what is conception? What is the aspect of conception? Conception means not just in physical form of procreation, but conception is that an idea or a spark that comes to the world. So take any revolution, whether it's like a industrial revolution or electric vehicle revolution, where it all started with a conception, a concept of something new. Someone had a spark of energy and decided to bring it to practicality and eventually to execution and made it a reality. But it all starts with, it comes into the world with a conception, with that spark of, here's the possibility. Hashem's telling Yirmiyah that before the conception, before there was even a possibility of Yirmiyah, what does Yirmiyah represent? Destruction. In other words, the devastating exile that was going to take place in his time. Before that was even conceived, Hashem appointed Yirmiyah to be the prophet and to be the one who would help the people through this difficult time. So let's translate this, because this also the name Yirmiyah has the word bitter in it, but let's skip that for a second, because I want to focus on what we just talked about. What did Yirmiyah say back to Hashem when Hashem told him that I designated you a prophet before you were conceived? What did Yirmiyah say? I'm too young. I'm not qualified. I don't have it in me. It's not my style. I'm not a public speaker. I'm just not the kind of guy. You need to find somebody else. That was his response. What are we learning, or what are we meant to learn from this dialogue? And why is Hashem telling us this? Why is this written in the book of Yirmiyah? So here's the powerful message. Here's the punchline that we have to take from this. There's a concept of illness and the remedy, right? So you have an illness, or you have a virus, or you have think of any challenge that the world, or let's stick to illness just because it's easier to build on that. So what do you do when you have an illness? You start figuring out what is a reliable medication that you could find to heal and then eventually prevent this illness from happening again, right? That's the goal. Hashem's style is a little bit different. In other words, our style as human beings is that we have the problem hits us, the problem faces us. I'm not talking about current events. I'm talking in general. That you discover there's a problem, there's an illness, there's a disease, there's something that has to be fixed. And then we start brainstorming, how can we fix this problem? That's how we humans operate. Hashem operates on a different level. For Hashem, before the problem even comes to fruition, and before the problem even presents itself, Hashem already has the cure. Hashem already has the antidote. And not only that, but Hashem actually secretly, or sometimes overtly, shares that antidote with us. So what was Hashem telling you? Before the destruction was even conceived, before there was going to be a destruction, before there was going to be a Yirmiyah, before Yirmiyah was conceived, Hashem had already planned the antidote, the cure to this horrific exile that was about to begin. And Hashem was telling Yirmiyah that it's already pre-planned, that whatever calamity might come to the face of the Jewish people, you're going to be the antidote. I gave it to you before you even conceived. It's not up to you to decide if you have it in you or not. It's not up to you to decide, am I old enough? Or am I respected enough? Or will people listen to me? Or is this my style? Nobody asked you. I planted this within you well before you were even in existence. This is the antidote to whatever disease might come during the time of the destruction. That's the message that we're reading in the haftarah, the Shabbos. So now back to the text that we read in the beginning. So what happens? And the word of Hashem comes to me saying, when I have not yet formed you in the womb, in other words, before you were conceived, I knew you. And when you had not yet emerged from the womb, I had appointed you a prophet to the nation I made you. This is what we read on the first week of the 3 weeks. Because what is Hashem really telling us? We all have that neshama. We all have that soul that Hashem gave Yirmiyah to. And every single one of our souls, even before conception, was already appointed for a specific task, a specific mission, as an antidote to whatever problem we're going to face in the world. And that's why the fetus, our fetus, us, when we were being, formed in the womb of our mother, we were taught the entire Torah. And we're told about it. Because the neshama, our neshama, is given a specific task and appointed a specific task as an antidote, as a cure to whatever calamity, whatever challenge, whatever insurmountable thing we might come across. We're already the antidote to that. And the angel, the Malach, is teaching us the Torah to give us the tools to overcome that challenge. The problem is that if we don't forget it, then it's not really a challenge anymore. Because if we already have the antidote, if we know exactly what the antidote is, people always like to ask, well, how do I know what my mission in life is? Or how do I know what my, purpose in life is? And if you knew, if it was that easy, then it really wouldn't be a purpose, wouldn't be a challenge. It wouldn't be something that you would work for. It wouldn't be something that would perfect your part of the world, because there would be no that. So the challenge is going to be there. And that's why the Malach, the angel, taps us on the lip to make us forget the fact that we learned the entire Torah, make us forget the fact that we were appointed. But in the haftarah this week, Hashem reminds us that before you were conceived, I appointed you. Before you were even a concept, before the destruction or the challenge was even a concept, I already appointed you and gave you the power to overcome the challenge and gave you the power to be the antidote. Now, don't think this is just about our challenges. Many of us, when we read something like this, we're trying to think about challenges that we face, but that's not really what Hashem has in mind. Because with Yirmiyah, he wasn't telling Yirmiyah how to overcome his own personal ghosts or demons or challenges. He was telling Yirmiyah how to be the antidote for the people. And that's a key fact over here. So let's take a look at this. This is text 10b. This is from the Rebbe. With the words, before I had formed you in the womb, I knew you. Hashem was telling Yirmiyah, you have a holy soul, a literal share of Hashem, sourced in something far higher and greater than the lowest depths of concealment. In other words, your neshama supersedes and surpasses anything you might face in your life. And that's why we are given that power before birth. We're given that knowledge before birth to give us the encouragement and the recognition that we already have it. It's already there. We just have to reveal it. Okay. The Rebbe continues. The reason, this is from the Alter Rebbe, but the Rebbe is quoting it. The reason to teach the fetus all the Torah is to illuminate it with divine light and inspire his love and fear of Hashem. Though transcendent, the Torah he or she has learned will serve to inspire the soul. Still, they must be made to forget Torah. So to grant the person freedom to choose good over bad. But the soul is impacted deeply by this study, and through it, it gains power to elevate the body, which it is integrated. This is inspired by the residue or the scar left by the Torah learning in the womb. And that's why when we study Torah, it's never for the first time. It's basically just reminding ourselves what we actually studied already. But practically, this is all here to tell us and to remind us that we have that superpower. We have that ability to overcome any challenge. I was actually just reading an article where somebody who suffers from severe anxiety was writing how the way they overcome their anxiety is they try to convince themselves that there's some celebrity, right? They go, let's say they go to a party. Usually they're full of anxiety. They don't want to talk to anyone. They don't feel comfortable in their own skin. So what do? What's their antidote? Is they convince themselves that there's some celebrity that everyone wants to talk to, everyone wants to be with. And in their minds, that helps them with their anxiety. There's a lot of truth to that because as a Jew with a neshama, you are a celebrity. You have a neshama. And that neshama was given the mission and the purpose to help everyone that you come in contact with. So you are a celebrity. And therefore, as long as you're able to recognize that and appreciate that Hashem chose you even before conception and appointed you to fulfill your mission in the world to help other people, that should give us the confidence to power forward with whatever it is that we might face, against whatever it is that we might face. So this is now the Rebbe continues. This is the meaning of when you had not yet emerged from the womb, I had appointed you. Not only were you imbued with the Holy Soul, but you were also sanctified. Already in the womb, you were prepared and empowered for your entrance into the world by studying the Torah. This is something that applies to all of us, not just to Yirmiyah. That's why we read it. It's because Hashem was telling Yirmiyah that you already have all the tools. You already have everything you need. You're already equipped. You're there. Just say yes. So this haftarah is read to remind us, to teach us the infinite power of our divine soul, and the light of the Torah that it's studied gives us the tools to light up any darkness. And most importantly, to use that light to help others and inspire others and teach others whenever we have a chance, even if we don't know everything ourselves or we don't think of ourselves as adequate, just like Yirmiyah said, I'm too young. Nevertheless, we are required because we have that knowledge, we have that power, we have the encouragement and the fact that Hashem appointed us, and we're in that situation to actually bring light to the other person and to the surroundings that we're in. There's one more quick text I want to read over here. So I'm sorry, I'm skipping these little slides. Here. So the Rebbe continues. It is demanded from every Jew that together with whatever he or she is doing internally, with their own soul, he or she must also engage another all the way to the lowest other possible. So even if it's someone that's not in our circles or someone that's not necessarily someone we can relate to, we have to engage with them because our job is to light up the other person. They must be concerned that that other person become a vehicle or a wellsprings of Torah and mitzvahs. This is the connection between the ideas discussed and the 3 weeks. The entire reason why we were dispatched into exile was to purify and uplift the very fabric of exile. We must do this to the extent that we turn the darkness itself into light. That it's not just that we light up the darkness, but we're actually able to elevate and transform the challenge, reveal the challenge as something that's also part of Hashem. And by doing that, we transform darkness itself into light. All right, now I want to go back to what I just skipped before. Give me 1 second. Okay. So why make an exile in the first place? It's because it helps us elevate the physical realm and transform the world into divine goodness. So some of us will say, who, me? I should be a leader. I should be someone that can light up the world. I could be Hashem's messenger, just like Yirmiyah was questioning his own value. So that was Yirmiyah's reaction to the role of the prophet. Now Hashem's response to us is, I imbued you with a soul before conception and train that soul for this mission. And that soul right now is within you. You have the power. You have the superpower. All you got to do is reveal it and have that confidence to be able to know that Hashem appointed you and gave you this mission to help and to inspire the people around you. So why are these verses relevant for our purposes? Why don't we read this haftarah of the Shabbos and the Shabbos of the 3 weeks? because Yirmiyah's time was a very, very difficult time, and it's actually not just the exile that happened then, but it represents all the exiles of the future and all the struggles we faced ever since. So his conversation with Hashem is also relevant to our struggles as well. And therefore, its message is still relevant to us. And we have to take up that challenge, take up that inspiration that Hashem gave us, and the reminder that we have that superpower within us to change the world and to fix the world. So another point that we also answer here is, what do the words mean that you didn't emerge from the womb yet? In other words, that you didn't, Hashem appointed him and designated him and consecrated him before he emerged from the womb. Even before we were born, we were endowed with a soul. And this teaches us that the soul comes before, this is very important. Because the soul came first, so the soul is the primary aspect of our lives. And therefore, as long as we recognize that, and the soul is put front and center, and it's actually going to shine through and be able to accomplish its mission here in this world. So let us hope we could, with every mitzvah that we do, we're able to reveal our soul, overcome the challenges as we see, and help each other overcome the challenges and turn that darkness into light, which is eventually what brings Mashiach, puts an end to the exile and brings Mashiach. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. All the best. Let me just stop recording.